The podcast, WOR710.com.
Welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show, ladies and gentlemen. As we all know, and thankfully, very thankfully, the Mexican flu, the swine flu, whatever you want to call it, just, don't call it what Obama wants you to call it, R2D2 flu, whatever the heck it is. It seems to have not developed the way we had feared it might. Now, my next guest is a man who has written about these kinds of things for years and years. I think I've known Michael Fumento for 15 years or so. He, way back when nobody would dare talk about it, was the one who basically dispelled the myth that heterosexuals were just as likely to catch AIDS and HIV as homosexuals and intravenous drug users, etc. He also weighed in on the Ebola virus, and he also weighed in on previous flu scares. And he's joining us right now to talk about this flu. First of all, Michael, welcome. And what do you call this flu?
I don't know. To a great extent, you could call it a hoax, practically.
Why so?
Because the early reports were just outrageously ridiculous, and there was no excuse for them. We were told right off the bat, very scary news, that about 2,500 Mexicans had contracted this disease, were known to have contracted it, and we know that for every person you know has the flu, there's tons and tons. It's like cockroaches. For everyone you see, there's lots and lots you don't. We were told that 159 Mexicans had died of it, and that was, again, very early on. And suddenly, practically all of the Mexican deaths and all the Mexican cases disappeared. I guess it was 590 Mexican cases as I talk, and about 30 Mexican deaths. But meanwhile, there have been no deaths other than among Mexicans. This is repeatedly, and even in yesterday's media, been compared to the greatest flu pandemic ever, the Spanish flu, that killed 50 million people
1918, correct?
Right.
500,000 Americans,
right.
and 50 million worldwide, right?
So far we have 30 deaths worldwide, all from one country, and it's being compared to a disease that killed 50 million people across the globe. That's not fair. That's not right.
No, that's not fair, and that's not right. And you've been through this before. We've been through this before. Who are the people that perpetuate this fear, and why do they do it, in your view? Is it out of ignorance? Is it out of well-meaning, mistakes that they make, or is there a method to their madness that's nefarious in nature?
All three, Steve. All three. I've seen lots and lots of ignorance. For example, right off the bat, I told people why there was a difference between Mexico and the United States. It's very simple.
And that is?
That people who have a lower health baseline to begin with are much more susceptible to any type of contagion, including flu. And most people do know that Mexicans don't have the standard of living of Americans. I think most of your listeners know that. Why didn't top health officials know that? Why didn't they know the history of epidemics as hitting much harder in third world countries than first world countries, even though it happens each and every year during seasonal flu season, as it were? So why didn't they know that? Why did we keep reading? This was very irritating to me. Nobody knows why Mexico has had such a high rate compared. I knew, and I was writing it.
We're talking to Michael Fumento, longtime science writer, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. All right, so this now is petering out, although I saw something flare somewhere, and I shouldn't say this if I don't have it in front of me. I think, okay, it was on the set on the right, which would have been CNN, so as I'll talk to you, I'll go to the website, but something about a death possibly in, here it is, this is on Fox now too, first American reportedly dies from swine flu in Texas. Now, we went through this once before, and it turned out to be a kid who came from Mexico. But let's see. Texas health officials confirmed the first death of the U.S. resident with swine flu. A few details have been released. But officials say the flu victim was a woman, who lived in Cameron County along the U.S.-Mexican border and had other chronic health problems. So what do you make of that? Nothing, right?
Well, okay. Then we have over 400 Americans who've contracted this flu.
403 in 38 states.
Right. And one who's died, which is a ratio of cases to deaths of 1 in 400. But I actually crunched the numbers on this to compare it to seasonal flu. And you can't actually look at,
What's the average? Yeah, what's the average seasonal flu?
The average for seasonal flu is normally put at about 0.1%, which is to say 1 person in 1,000.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like then we're twice that, aren't we? Except that the ratio is not deaths to cases, it's deaths to infections.
Right,
Remember what I said earlier?
Right.
For every case. So I crunched the numbers on U.S. cases to U.S. infections, and that 1 in 400 would be something like, actually far less than 1/100th
the
rate of seasonal flu.
Less than the seasonal. Okay, so let's talk about now the next point of interest, and that is, they say that this could come back, and it could come back in a stronger form, or it could come back in the fall and winter when, I don't know, somehow the flu virus, thrives as opposed to now. Any of these reason for legitimate concern?
Yes, the flu virus as well as cold definitely thrive in cold weather. Nobody's entirely sure why. Interesting theories, won't go into them. But what that means is it could be much more contagious. No, cold weather doesn't make flu or the cold more severe. And that's a very powerful distinction to draw. So far, what we've seen with swine flu is not just that it's far less severe, but that it's also far less contagious. So if this thing is still hanging around come fall, it definitely could become more
contagious, but not necessarily more severe.
No.
Right, gotcha. So it'll just be the latest form of flu that's going around, God willing, and not be any more severe than we're seeing now, at least in this country.
Right.
All right. Well, Michael, I put a lot of faith in you because, as I said, I've always admired you, and I admired the stance you took with AIDS and telling the truth about the threat of AIDS to heterosexuals compared to homosexuals way back early on, and they're still not doing that. They're still teaching my kid in school as a third grader, the evils and the threats of HIV, while they ignore cancer and heart disease and things that he really has to worry about. Their whole curriculum is focused on HIV. We really haven't made that much progress at all, except the gay lobby has made a lot of progress.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate that during all these panics, there are always people who stand ready to cash in. And that's, other than the ignorance you mentioned, which is a factor, and fear, which is a factor, there are all sorts of people cashing in on swine flu as well.
Yeah, with the selling of the Tamiflu and over-the-counter drugs and the masks and everything else.
And not even necessarily financially.
Yeah.
We see, for example, the Democrats have been blasting Republicans for cutting pandemic flu spending out of the so-called stimulus bill.
You're absolutely right. Obama, the first comments he made basically implied that we haven't been doing enough scientific research under Bush, and he was to blame. He didn't say those exact words, but that's exactly what he was getting at, which is incredible. And you're absolutely right. They used it
spent $5.6 billion on pandemic avian flu.
Yeah.
Only some of which could possibly carry over to other types of flu. $5.6 billion. That swamps the budgets for, even AIDS.
Yeah.
But, cancer, Alzheimer's. How many Americans have died of avian flu so far? And pull out the calculator. Let's do some calculations here. Zero.
Yeah,
Zero Americans have died of avian flu. But we spent $5.6 billion, and now we're being told there's actually a fight between the Republicans and the Democrats over whose fault it is that we didn't spend more.
I know. Hey, Michael, always a pleasure, my friend. Stay well. We'll talk to you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Michael Fumento, ladies and gentlemen, longtime science writer. And he wrote the book, I think it was called The Myth of heterosexual AIDS, as a matter of fact. Okay, when we come back, well, first of all, we have a lot to get to today.